Hello and welcome to Indecent Exposure, the show that scrapes the barrel that is the Xbox Live indie game marketplace and finds some pretty nifty things to highlight. This week is a special episode as I'm joined by a guest for a bit of a chat about indie games, the Xbox marketplace in general, and this game he just developed for some guys called Penny Arcade. Enjoy! Hey, this is Chris and Picky, and today I am joined by Bill Stiernberg from Zeboyd Games, who has just released, let me get the full title here, Penny Arcade Adventures on the Rain-Slick Precipice of Darkness, Episode 3. How are you, Bill?
Hi, I'm pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thanks for asking. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, Zeboyd Games have only just started working on the Penny Arcade series Episode 3. Before that, another developer, Hothead Games, were responsible for Episode 1 and 2. Now, 1 and 2 tried to recreate the Penny Arcade art style with a 3D, cel-shaded world, whereas Episode 3 is very much, well, it's your preferred style really, Bill, I guess. 16-bit sprites that look like they've escaped from the Super Nintendo era. First of all, what's the response been like to this change in visuals?
Well, actually, the response has been overall very positive. I think that this style kind of resonates with a lot of Penny Arcade fans, and I mean, a lot of that is nostalgia, but a lot of it, I guess, is sort of that, just kind of that classic look to it. But I think more importantly, it turns out that the Penny Arcade characters and style actually translates really well into the classic 16-bit aesthetic. And I say that because if you look at, Gabe and Tycho and a lot of the characters, they have a lot of very bold, distinct features. And just as an example, Gabe has the large, black, solid spikes, and Tycho has a very square, long jaw. And those kind of features translate really well into 16-bit sprites and pixel art, because when you're working on those very small, little small square blocks of pixel art, the more distinct and the bolder and the larger the features, the easier it is to convey how the characters look. And so, I wasn't really expecting that to happen when I started, but as I started making the sprites and building the world and doing the enemies, I realized that it's actually a fairly natural transition, and I think it turned out pretty good. So the fan response, I think because of those factors, has actually been very positive. Of course, we have a few people that, they miss the cel-shaded look of the Hothead games, which was executed very well. But considering, the series has been resurrected and it's a new studio and it's a new type of game, overall it's been very positive. And, it really hit home to us at PAX when people had, very good feedback after playing our demo.
Of course. Yeah, with the first two, the Penny Arcade illustrator Mike Krelowick was more involved with the actual artwork, whereas with this one it's been more up to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could say that. I don't know if you saw Mike's post.
Yeah,
he actually wrote about it a few days, or I guess maybe it was a week or two ago. But, he, according to that post, he basically did all this concept art and filled these sketchbooks, but felt that his actual work didn't really show through in the game. It was derivative of his sketches and things that other artists put together. And as an artist myself, I can understand how, you feel like you've done a ton of work, but it doesn't actually make it into the thing that people see, not directly. So with Episode 3, I guess you could say Penny Arcade as a whole has been more of a sort of a they have the final say. If I draw something, I'll send it to them, and especially for important characters and things like that, they'll look at it and say, oh yeah, that looks great, let's go with that. Or they'll say, well, this would be better if we change it this way, and this way. So, Mike has, he hasn't been doing the art for this game or anything like that, but he and the other guys at Penny Arcade have the final say on, does this look bad? Does this look good? Or should we go with this direction, kind of thing?
Sure. It's especially as you're just taking it on Episode 3. It must be very useful to have someone to cross-reference with that kind of thing.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of how to go about this kind of thing, I actually went through all of the Penny Arcade comic strips, all the way, starting at the very first one, going forward all the way, and I did that to get ideas and things like that, and you'll see a lot of enemies and little jokes recurring visually and also in the writing, but the writing was Robert and Jerry's part. But also I did that so I could get a feel for how things look and how Mike Krahulik basically drew, kind of the way he draws the characters and creatures and stuff in Penny Arcade, and so I think that helped a lot.
Sure, I mean the art style of the comics alone has changed quite drastically when you go back and look at the early ones.
Right, it has, and it's even changed in several significant ways since the first two Hothead games.
Sure.
I don't know if you noticed that, but a lot of people fondly remember how Hothead translated the Penny Arcade's comic style to 3D art, and I think it's kind of interesting if they had just carried over the same 3D models and everything, it would have clashed with Mike's current style, which is way more expressive, I think, especially in the faces of characters, but he's also kind of tweaked the way he does lines, and I think he's put a little bit more of a curve to faces and limbs and stuff like that. It's easier to see if you compare the comic strip side by side from 2007, 2008 to the ones he's putting out now, but it's definitely changed.
Right, so not only have you got to get the Penny Arcade style, you've got to get the right Penny Arcade style.
Right. Yeah, it's more. He's got a new style now than he did then, and I tried to base it more. The stuff that I did for the game, I tried to base it more on his more recent things.
Got you. Okay, and then with the Zeboyd games themselves, there's been some changes as you've gone along. I mean, the battle system, it still plays very in a very similar fashion to Breath of Death, but you can see some. You've obviously had to adjust with each game and make improvements as you go along. How much of that has been down to feedback from players, or is it more of a case of you as developers becoming more experienced with the whole format?
Well, we're always taking feedback from fans and from reviewers to try and make our games better and adjust things in our formulas to address stuff that people didn't like, but also to build on things that people did like. With this particular game, instead of just continuously extrapolating from Breath of Death 7, which is what Cthulhu Saves the World was, very similar gameplay, we wanted to take a lot of the core ideas of quick battles and player choice and how they build their party, but do something new for us, something fresh, but still premised on those concepts. So obviously, with Rain Slick 3, we have fairly quick battles, although they're longer than Cthulhu and Breath of Death on average.
Yeah.
But we wanted to give the battles a little bit more depth and a little bit more variety of strategy that you can use to play them. And so as a result, there's a lot of battles are longer. Of course, there's no random encounters or things like that, so you're not constantly running into the same group of enemies and spamming the same attacks.
Yeah.
It builds on the core concepts of our ideas that we went forward with Breath of Death, but it does it in a different way, and I think it's more interesting with the battles this time around, and most people seem to agree with that based on reviews and stuff.
Yeah, it seems like you've taken some things from episode 1 and 2 as well to try and make the series feel connected in some way. Obviously, the battle systems are very different, but some of the ideas with the interrupts and how the mana and the abilities build up throughout the battles. Am I right in saying that?
Well, we didn't really base those ideas on the previous games. I think it's more of a coincidence, and I think a good coincidence, that there's kind of a tenuous connection between the battle systems. But most of the ideas came from the battle structure and the way it plays out came from Robert's ideas, and just thinking about ways to eliminate the need to go stock up on potions and give the player a handful of items that would actually be useful without having to constantly go to the shop buying more of this stuff and that stuff, and also eliminating the ability to just spam a bunch of them in battles.
Sure.
So with that, we thought it would be a lot cooler to give them a set number of uses, and you can upgrade those uses rather than just having items that you use once and then go buy more. And I think it prevents people from stocking up on a million of them, but I think it also forces you to kind of just think about different strategies. You know, you can't just keep healing. You know, have a guy that's just spamming potions the whole battle. You have a limited number of items, and so you have to think about, you know, different ways to attack these enemies that you encounter. And it ties in with the way that the MP system works, which I think people are seeing a lot of similarities to Rainslick 1 and 2 in the sense that you kind of had to build up to unleash your more powerful attacks, and in a similar way, you have to let your MP build up in Rainslick 3 before you can unleash your more powerful attacks. And that's a cool analogy, but you know, the main reason we did that is because we wanted to give people the option of feeling like they could use their powerful attacks in any battle without constantly having to worry about MP conservation over the course of a map, which was something that people kind of had to do in our past 2 games.
Yeah, definitely.
This way it gives them that opportunity to not feel obligated to stock up on MP, but they can still, you know, they're still forced to kind of decide whether they want to use a weak attack now or a more powerful attack later, and it gives the combat a little bit more of an interesting twist.
It's still resource management, but it's more on a individual battle basis more than throughout the entire area, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. You're more concerned about how do I take on this battle instead of, okay, do I have enough potions or do I have enough MP for this entire dungeon? And if I don't, I'm screwed.
Okay, cool. Moving on to the indie game marketplace, actually, on the Xbox, which I still find fascinating. If you look at Robert's Twitter feed in the days following the launch of Episode 3, it's very clear that, you know, the success of this game is really important for both of you as developers. And it was only 2 years ago that you released your first game together on the indie game marketplace, and now you're working alongside Penny Arcade and making quite the name for yourself. When you look back at the development of Breath of Death, did you realise that the indie marketplace could act as such a starting platform for you guys?
Well, at the time, short answer is no, but at the time, it was just kind of a fun little side project to do. I mean, at first, and I was actually in law school at the time, so at the time it was not a full-time career type thing. Of course, we were both treating it as the end goal. You know, having our own studio and making it a full-time job and making it a success. So since the very beginning, we treated it as though that was the end goal and sort of built towards that. But, you know, when we very first started, it's hard to imagine, oh yeah, definitely 2-3 years from now we'll be doing this full. We'll definitely have these successes. Oh yeah, we'll certainly be working under, you know, Penny Arcade or some other group. So at the time, you know, we really couldn't conceive of being where we are here now back then. So, but you know, at the time we were doing it for fun then, and we're still doing it because it's fun now. We wouldn't be, you know, slogging through this if it was painful. So even back then, it was tons of fun, and we treated it like a serious business, and we're still doing that now, and I think that's helped a lot. But
sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, you seem to have taken it in your stride remarkably well in just 2 years. You know, 3 very successful games on the indie marketplace, made the transition to Steam. It's definitely, you must be a role model to some the developers out there at the moment.
Yeah, we get a lot of emails actually from people that say, hey, you know, I've followed your games since Breath of Death, and seeing you go from that humble beginning, and I still think we're kind of a humble company. You know, we don't have billions of fans or anything, but a lot of people have emailed us to say that, you know, it's encouraging and motivating to see a couple of guys start small and continuously build on each game, and eventually catch the attention of a fairly big, fairly well-known company like Penny Arcade. So yeah, it's exciting to get those emails because it makes you feel like you're kind of making a difference in a small way for people, and I like seeing that kind of thing.
Sure. With Penny Arcade Episode 3, you have released it on Steam, and you've obviously got a bunch of other platforms in mind in the near future. But you also released it on the indie marketplace and not the Xbox Live Arcade. What was the reasoning behind that? So is that just a matter of price?
Well, there's actually a lot of differences between Xbox Live Indie Games and Xbox Live Arcade. And the gist of it is that Xbox Live Indie Games is a more flexible platform, I guess you could say. In this, essentially, you can set your own price, and there's no back and forth bargaining with Microsoft on the price. And there's no ESRB system that you have to pass through, and there's no long certification process for the game, and there is a peer review system, but I'll get to that. And then there's no added cost of certification anytime you want to release a patch or anything like that, and you're not kind of cornered into specific release dates. Microsoft, it curates Xbox Live Arcade, and so from what I understand, they have a lot of say in when a game may or may not come out.
Oh, absolutely. They have very specific slots that you have to fill.
Right. And then the other thing is, what was it? There was one other thing about that. Oh, right. I was going to say that in certain circumstances, and I don't know all the details because we're not on XBLA, but as I understand it, some games have sort of a timed exclusivity thing when they go on XBLA, and that's why you see games come out on Steam 6 months later, or something to that effect. And that all of these reasons are why Penny Arcade was totally on board with going on Xbox Live Indie Games, is because of that freedom, and also we're used.
Yeah, of course, you're very familiar with the indie marketplace. So was it more more Zeboyd Games' decision than Penny Arcade? So you wanted to avoid all that hassle, focus on Steam, and make sure you could still supply to the Xbox at the same time?
Well, it was actually kind of a combined decision. Penny Arcade was all aboard with going on Xbox Live Indie Games as well. And yeah, they didn't have any problem going that over XBLA for Slick 3 because of those reasons I mentioned. And we kind of expected Steam to sort of take the lead. Of course, Penny Arcade has a lot of console fans, and so they're constantly looking for ways to put these games on the consoles, and then also on the other platforms like iPad, Android, and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a little harder to find on the indie marketplace, but if you're if you're a fan of the series, then it's no more difficult than getting it off the arcade.
Yeah, we would have gotten a lot more helpful, I guess, push from Microsoft on XBLA because that's their premium platform. But for Penny Arcade, this was just, there were a lot less hurdles and a lot less things to do, and we're a small company and we're involved with Xbox Live Indie Games, and it was just so much easier and quicker and far fewer hurdles and easier to manage as far as when we're working with our porting house partner Tinker House Games for the other platforms and getting it out on Steam. It's just easier to not have to worry about manage and have Microsoft curating its own market by trying to get us into one slot or the other, and da-da-da-da-da. So it was, and that's why it was a good decision for both of us, Zeboyd and Penny Arcade.
Sure. You mentioned with the indie marketplace that you ran into a problem with the peer review process. Delayed the release by, was it 4 days on the indie marketplace? Do you want to just talk about what happened there?
4 or 5 days. Yeah, well, it wasn't so much a problem as, it was a problem in the sense that the Xbox version came out 4 or 5 days after the PC version. It missed its release date. But, so the Xbox Live Indie channel has I'm going to call it a certification process, but its official name is peer review. And it's essentially, to release a game on Xbox Live Indie Games, Microsoft is pretty hands-off, and instead they put up a system where other developers review each other's games, and if you get a certain number of passes, then the game comes out, and if your game doesn't meet one of the requirements or fail or doesn't live up to one of the rules, then the other developers will fail the game. And the consequences of failing is that you don't get to release your game the next day. So that's basically what happened. We had submitted we didn't have certain code in there that we thought we did, a fail-safe against one of the fail criteria, which is if you save your data to a memory card, a memory unit, or a USB drive, and if you yank the memory unit out while the game is saving, then it will cause a certain crash. And sure enough, that's what happened. Unfortunately, it's an unrealistic scenario that somebody sitting next to their Xbox and pulling the memory card out as they're saving, but it is a fail criteria, and we had to add in another fail-safe for that so that we could release it. Unfortunately, it came out. It came out on the same week. It wasn't on the release day, and that's unfortunate, but it came out soon enough that Xbox fans didn't have to wait too long.
Yeah, I spoke to another developer at the beginning of this series about the peer review system, and it sounds like the criteria is essentially if I do this, does the game crash? And it has less to do with the quality of the game itself. It's more to just safeguard against.
Yeah, it's not a curated market, so developers have no say on quality. It's not a it's pretty similar, I guess, in a sense to open markets like the Apple App Store, where there's no bar of game quality, and part of that is because that's extremely subjective. And since Microsoft is hands-off and not curating the platform, the Xbox Live Indie Game platform, all of the rules they're almost all technical. There are a few content-based ones, like you can't have certain sex, it can't be X-rated, for example.
But you can get rather close.
I know, and there are a few which kind of walk the line or whatever, but yeah, there's very few content rules, and they're mostly technical, but there's definitely not quality rules. You can't say, this game has failed because I think it's a terrible game. If it doesn't make it out onto the Xbox Marketplace, it's because somebody pulled a memory card out while they were saving a file, that kind of thing. There's pros and cons to this, and it's been a long debate among developers on Xbox Live Indie Games about, what's right and what's wrong. Is it right to release a bunch of games that were poorly made simply because you can, or is it okay to let the market decide what games it thinks are good and bad? And so that's the debate that will be going on forever on Xbox Indie Games, and also the Apple Marketplace, and essentially any sort of hands-off free market platform for games and software.
Absolutely. I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. For other developers that are listening and thinking about the future of the Xbox Live Indie Marketplace, and considering it's not really a priority for Microsoft anymore, is it still a good place for them to start? Can they be the next Zeboyd Games?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start. For, people say, or you'll read a lot of articles about how sales are bad and Microsoft has kind of abandoned Xbox Live Indie Games, or how it gets buried in the dashboard. And all of that's true, and certainly there are things Microsoft could do to help the channel, some of them fairly simple things, but it's still the only service where a completely indie developer can make a game with an extremely low cost barrier. It's $100 for a membership. Everything else is free, and make a game from scratch and release it on a successful home console with a huge install base. It's the only avenue to do that right now, and so because of that, I think it's a great place to start. There's a lot of things and a lot of ways and a lot of stuff you can learn from it in terms of development, but also in sales and marketing a game. And I think it's a great platform to start because of that reason. Is it a great place to operate a business? That's highly questionable. Yeah. A lot of developers would flat out say, heck no, terrible place to run a development business only on that platform.
Sure.
But that's debatable, and I definitely think it's a good place to start, and there's a lot of stuff you can learn by doing it, and the barrier to entry is extremely low, and it's the only place you can do that and release it on a huge, successful home console. So I think for that reason, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I remember with you guys in Cthulhu Saves the World, you ended up having a crazy amount of sales on your first week on Steam. I think more than your previous sales on the indie marketplace altogether. But would you say that it was more of a case of you impress players on the Xbox marketplace without breaking the bank, and then trying to port over to the PC once you've got that larger audience more interested?
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. That's another good way to kind of get your foot in the door in this industry is through Xbox Live Indie Games, because it's a way to get a game out to a lot of people that they can play easily. And if your game is truly good and you put yourself out there, it can get people's attention despite being on this little itty-bitty market on the Xbox. And if you can do that, surely it will greatly help your chances of getting more exposure when you go to other platforms, whether that's Steam on PC or the Apple App Store, or maybe if you're lucky you can get an eShop release like Abin Hawkins, which is another Xbox Live indie game, or a PlayStation Mini. So yeah, you can definitely start on Xbox and get some positive coverage, and then use that as a stepping stone to greater success later on, whether it's on Steam or some other platform.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure if any indie game developers are listening at the moment, that's been incredibly useful for them to hear beforehand. Bill, thank you very much for your time. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up? Obviously, episode 3, I think.
Well, just go out and try Rain Slick 3 if you like RPGs or you like ridiculous humor. And if you're looking forward to a mobile release, we are working with Tinker House to get the Mac version, the iPad, iPhone, iPod Touch, Android versions coming in a couple of months. So we'll have more specifics later, but those versions are still in the works.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.